Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Digital Leader Show, where we talk key issues and news at the intersection of business and technology in hopes of making you a better digital leader. We're live every Wednesday at noon Eastern, 9 Pacific on LinkedIn and YouTube, and the audio recording is available wherever you get your podcasts. I'm Dan Goodstein. I head up IRPA AI. We're a professional association, media, and peer-to-peer research network providing education, networking, and advice to over 130,000 members globally, all around automation, enterprise AI, and digital transformation. Today, we're discussing how autonomous systems will reshape human interaction with former Cisco CX executive David Richards, plus headlines for digital leaders from the world of enterprise technology. Thanks to our sponsor, Oracle NetSuite. Their cloud ERP helps provide real-time visibility into operational and financial performance. Podcast followers can get preferred pricing of up to 45% off at irpaai.com/NetSuite. I'm joined today, as always, by Chris Surdak, Senior Analyst for IRPA AI, former White House Chief Transformation Office Advisor, Partner for Digital Transformation at Gartner, and AI Practice Lead at EY. Chris, good afternoon, buddy.
Good afternoon. Welcome to the second half of the year, 2025.
Second half of the year is here. You warned me. I didn't see it coming. You know, it sneaks up on me every year, but you said that last week and scared me.
If you really want to get scared, contemplate that we're more than halfway through the 2020s also.
Oh my God.
Exactly.
You just ruined my positive attitude for
the way through the 21st century. Yeah, we can go on.
So lots going on, Chris. Let's jump into headlines. I think the main story for me is lots of legal victories for AI this week. We reported a couple of weeks ago on Congress's big beautiful bill, Trump's big beautiful bill that Congress is looking at, and it looks like the AI piece, the part of the bill that was going to force states to not regulate AI for the next 10 years has been pulled out of at least the current iteration of the bill after the Senate voted this week. So that's kind of one aspect of potential regulation. But other than that, I mean, there was a copyright lawsuit this week that basically said that AI can train on a copyrighted material that's available on the web. So wild stuff. And there's still nobody running the U.S. Copyright Office. The person in charge there was let go by the current administration, and there's nobody in that role. So there's even some conversations about whether or not copyrights that are being issued right now are even gonna hold up. So not a lot of I guess positive momentum for the AI space, I guess, is my point.
Well, Dan, why don't you sign up for that role, right? You can run the Copyright Office. It would be like being the iceberg lookout on the Titanic, the night or the morning of, right? I will take issue with something you said, which is, there are no victorious lawsuits. There's only victorious lawyers. And the fight's not over. You've gotten a ruling. That's not the same thing as a decision. So it's going to continue. I think for me, the takeaway is whether or not we regulate AI apparently is astonishingly important to some people with a lot of money on their hands, and they really care a lot about which way this decision goes. So stay tuned, right? Expect more legal battles. To me, what's revealing is the fact that this is such a contentious issue, and people this is the hill people are willing to die on. So it makes you wonder, okay, what precisely is at stake that this is so important to some really important and very wealthy people?
But help me understand this, right? You're a former practicing attorney. I mean, how are these copyrighted materials not protected by this, right? I mean, I guess there's some subtext in there that, if it's not commercialized or what have you, then it's not subject to the copyright. But I didn't understand this. My non-legal brain didn't understand it. And it seemed pretty straightforward. At least the most recent ruling on this, I forget which exact lawsuit it was. Oh, it was Anthropic. But it basically says it's fair use.
So point of clarification, I have my Juris Doctor, but I'm not a practicing attorney and wasn't, which is something I did very purposefully because it allows me to actually be much more ethical than most of the attorneys I ever worked with. I'm not bound by the a whole other story. So what's going on here? For a good 20 years, I was working with attorneys, judges, trying to explain to them how technology worked in the sense of digital evidence. So e-discovery, really where I got a lot of the depth of my experience in analytics and automation and so forth. And there's a natural disconnect between technical people and legal people. The two do not mix very well at all. It's very much oil and water. And so as an engineer, when you go into a courtroom, you're talking about facts. You're talking about, to engineers, there's one right answer and infinite wrong answers, right? That's kind of how the universe works. You're either right or you're wrong. In the law, there's good and bad arguments. And so, which is where you get this notion of you get as much justice as you can afford. Do you have someone that can make really good arguments? Facts are kind of not really important in the narrative. And so when you look at this at its face, how in the world can someone who authored something uniquely lose their copyright privileges under the law? Someone just made a better argument the other way. And which is why there'll be another iteration and another iteration and another iteration of this, probably for a good 4, 5, 6 years, because people will just, as the stakes keep going up, as I said a moment ago, there's a lot of warfare over this going on. So someone in the next round is going to try to make better arguments based upon how they lost in this round. So more to come. It's sort of a dangerous precedent, but again, we're going to see the stakes get higher and higher. So we're going to see better and better arguments, and then we'll see which way the flag flies at that point.
Yeah, I mean, the copyright thing is pretty impactful to me. And then there's this other article it came out of a TechCrunch report that Facebook is feeding its AI with private unpublished photos. So something to the effect of one of your favorite things, the end user license agreement privacy update thing. And according to this report, they kind of push this through without people realizing it. And of course, they're saying always read the terms and conditions, but nobody does, right? So now that the lines are, it used to be, hey, well, if I select a photo and I know that photo is going to get uploaded, that's one thing. But now basically saying, well, we're not going to upload all your other photos. We're just going to put them in our engine and use them to teach the algorithm.
Well, so I look at this headline and say, well, what do you mean by private, and what exactly do you mean by unpublished? Right? In what universe that you have this personal tracking device? Is there such a thing as privacy? And in that, does that overlap with the universe with this notion of unpublished? Those terms don't mean anything in the current paradigm we've been in for the last 12 to 15 years. Simply having the cover off your phone camera means that it's not private, and it means you're publishing. So again, and these are the arguments that are going to be made in the subsequent lawsuit that follows this move. So you've already given ownership rights, or I should say full licensure to anything that your phone sees. Not that you snapped a photo, but if the camera is exposed to something, Facebook has the license to use whatever your camera happens to be looking at. And if you want more evidence of this, go back 12 years to Pokemon Go, when we were all running around chasing a Pokemon with our camera like this. What do you think Nintendo was doing? They were sending you out to take photos of the inside of buildings that they wanted to see the inside of. So, I mean, this is old news.
Wow, crazy. The other headline I wanted to hit before we invite our guest to join us is there's this piece in Wired about essentially this AGI paper that OpenAI is about to release, and there's a couple points to this story. One is that they believe that they are at or very, very close to artificial general intelligence, which is kind of crazy in its own right, probably worth an entire show for just that. But the other part of it is that apparently there's a small clause in OpenAI's contract with Microsoft which would basically break up the agreement. Microsoft, of course, has invested more than $13 billion in OpenAI. And interesting to me that not only is there a clause in there, not only do they think they're getting to this point, but they seem to want to maybe break up this partnership.
Again, a headline, headlines crack me up. So 3 words jump out of that headline: unreleased, which means it could be released, complicate, and negotiations. So I mean, if there's ever been a more naked threat that I could see, there it is, right? As we're trying to negotiate another $15 billion out of you, Microsoft, just so you know, there's this paper that we could release that would complicate things. It's like we're sitting here watching old episodes of Ally McBeal, if you're old enough to remember that, right? Or Suits, or name your legal drama. This is a legal drama unfolding in front of us, and the semi-naked threat of this headline just cracks me up. But it goes back to something that, I mean, you and I talked about this a year ago too. The mere fact that there's this clause in the agreement that says OpenAI gets freedom from Microsoft if they've achieved AGI, and the definition of AGI is whatever we define it to be, is why you're having this 20, 30, 50, whatever $1 billion dispute unfold before our eyes. So, stay tuned, more to come.
So do you think they're there though, or is this just a legal contractual posturing or what have you, or are they really as close as they say they are? I think they are.
Close to what? If you're allowed to come up with the definition of what you're close to, this is the old Bill Clinton thing. It depends on what you mean by is or was, or right. If I can just make up the definition of words like copyright, and I can choose what a copyright is on the fly, then have they achieved AGI? I don't know. They did a year ago, according to them. If I'm just making up the definitions of words, who cares what words mean anymore?
Yeah, you're extra feisty today. I like it.
Well,
more than normal even.
It's been a long working morning.
Well, let's get to our main topic. I want to invite in today's guests, David Richards. He's a former Marine Corps officer with 15 years of service, corporate leader in the customer experience at Cisco, sought after executive coach specializing in executive presence and transformational leadership, a #1 international best-selling author, has worked with the likes of Fidelity, Microsoft, Cisco. David, welcome to the show. Thanks for joining us.
Dan, Chris, good to be with you. Thank you so much for having me on.
So first of all, you have a very interesting journey from a military career to the corporate world, which I always find an interesting transition. Tell us a little bit about your background and how you got from there to here.
Yeah, sure. I grew up in the military. So my dad was a career Marine. He served 31 years on active duty. So moved around a lot, mostly up and down the East Coast, and wanted to be a writer. But when you grew up on military bases, and certainly this is well before the world was as connected as it is today, it doesn't necessarily come naturally on how you're going to accomplish that. So I went to Penn State on a ROTC scholarship, joined the Marines after graduation, was in the artillery, went to Somalia, supported the ceasefire campaign of Desert Storm. And as I went through my career, became kind of disenchanted and realized that I was just replaying my dad's life. Basically, that was kind of my blueprint. So I made a decision to get out in 2006, got into a great position with Cisco and worked with them for 17 years, did various roles, both in the public sector, as well as in the larger enterprise space, supporting some of our bigger accounts like JP Morgan Chase, Bank of America. And then really decided to get out or left them in 2023 to continue coaching. So I'd been a coach for them since 2017, but wanted to kind of do my own thing and branch out and continue my writing work as well.
So if I may, Dan.
Yeah, Chris, go ahead.
David, thanks for your service.
Absolutely.
Awesome run into a fellow Penn Stater.
Beautiful.
And I love the giant geode in the background there.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Lots of purple.
Yeah, I saw the purple theme going on, so that's cool.
Oh, we are Penn State. I love it.
Yeah.
So what's interesting, there's a few companies that I think of at at least in my career, were the leaders in the contact center, customer experience space. Cisco is definitely up there, one of them. It's interesting the timing that you left. I think maybe things were getting really exciting from an AI perspective at that point. But what can you talk about? Like how did that transition happen? Did they see it coming? Did they lead it? Like where did the kind of CX transformation kind of start?
Yeah, so I'm going to take you back to right before the pandemic, because I think the impact of AI and where it's going to lead us is reflective of what happened at Cisco during the pandemic. So in the summer before the pandemic, I received a promotion. I took over the outsourcing component of Cisco's TAC, so their Trouble Assistance Center. And it was fantastic because 1,800 people across the world getting into that space and learning how that works. And then the pandemic happens. And in 10 days, Cisco moves its entire 75,000 workforce from working in the office to working from home. What happened then? Well, then first you start to realize that so many of the relationships I have in the office are relationships of proximity. They're not people I work with. They're people I see every day. And so I develop relationships with them. And when that's removed, you suddenly start to have this revelation. Well, either my work is done in 4 hours in what normally takes 8 because I spend a lot of time socializing at the office. And then the backside of that was, okay, who do I need to talk to get done what I need to get done? And what ended up happening, and I don't have documented evidence of this, but based on where I was in the company and what I started to see, Cisco started to treat its internal operations like a network. So you started to look at where are the holdups in our network internally to the company. At the same time, our innovation teams were developing bots. And the first place is, can these bots handle low-level trouble calls from customers? Well, yes, they can. And they can do it so well that customers think they're talking to a human being. Well, that's great. I mean, I don't think we're quite past the Turing test yet, but the idea that a bot can solve something for a customer and do it with enough personality that it creates the customer experience that we want, and it's done by a bot. That's fantastic. To take that further, where I think I see the shift coming is all companies are composed of processes, systems and processes that are driven by people. Well, what happens then when you start to take AI and say, okay, let's have AI evaluate the systems and processes that we have in place and figure out how to optimize that? And I think that's what I started to see at Cisco. And so what happened at Cisco from 2020 to 21, and I think they missed 22 and then 23, 3 out of those 4 years, they were the #1 place to work in the US. Because it was, and part of it is too, you start to realize that your CX is all about the ecosystem, not just the customer's ecosystem, the internal ecosystem of your company, because the employee experience in some capacity mirrors the customer's experience. If your employees know what they're doing and know that they're part of a much larger team, then they're going to respond to the customers in a different way. As AI comes on board and as the bots started to take over, you could just see, and I did lift it. I did leave it at kind of an exciting time, but you could see the encroachment of bots doing more and more complex things because there was a compounding effect. There's a synergistic effect where if we can get these bots from these different parts of the company start talking together, then there's a synergy we've just created.
Yeah. Was there ever a conversation or a point where, you guys felt like the bots were doing a better job than the people from a CX perspective?
I think there was more consistency because you realize that a bot doesn't necessarily have a bad day, or they don't have a child who's sick, or they're not going through some personal issue at home. So there's a consistency that you see there. At the same time, there were issues and levels of complexity that the bots were unable to handle, and then you needed a seasoned engineer. But I would say, I don't remember. And again, I left I think I was leaving, and I think, what was it, November of 22 when OpenAI kind of got introduced, if my timeline's right. So I was leaving just around that time when it was coming online. I don't have insights into how Cisco has, or what kind of relationship they have with OpenAI, if anyone. I know I have worked with some people in Microsoft, so I have a sense of that. But to answer your question, I think it was just a consistency that bots can provide.
David, if I may, this is fascinating to me because in 2017, 2018, when I started working with IRPA as a consultant at EY, one of my clients for RPA was Cisco. I helped to actually roll out Cisco's policy and the governance framework for managing RPA.
Okay.
So as you're talking about consistency, that was one of the goals I saw with Cisco as a client. How do we structure this so it's sort of controllable? And so you kind of dominate that part of the battlefield. Hey, the predictability stuff, we've kind of nailed that. And then you're kind of like, well, wait a minute, all this other stuff that we can't really handle in a predictable fashion, we kind of need either AI or arguably people to manage that. Is that kind of consistent with what you experienced as well?
Yeah, very much so. There were, I think I had peripheral insight into the labs that were developing that, because after the pandemic, kind of the initial blunt of the pandemic, the first year, I got moved to a different team, and it was really focused on how do we optimize some of our internal processes and systems? How do we optimize some of our offers? And so I started to see, and there were seams that we wanted to keep the bots localized in, because some of it was, yes, it would be neat if they could do this level of support, yet because that level of support now brings in other organizations or departments, it becomes a little bit sticky. And so it's, okay, we're not there yet, because we need to then build up the AI capabilities in these corresponding departments or organizations. So that then there is that feed that we talked about. So there was some talk about that and development of that, but I think it was, let's get everyone on board. And that's why there was at least one, if not two, while I was there, reorganizations within CX, because it was, we need to get all the pieces together so that we have one entity who is kind of controlling how we automate within the company.
All right. So, sorry to run with this, but I'm going to pick at one of my favorite scabs, given, the title here, how do autonomous systems reshape human interactions? Would you also agree that the challenge there, as you just stated, was more political than technical? And since I started doing automation in 1994 with Lotus Notes, we keep fixing the technology, and the technology gets more powerful. And the constraint to what we can do with the technology continues to be us and our politics and our social systems and so forth. I mean, we keep running up against the same wall, and we've met the enemy, and the enemy is us, right?
Well, and it's a great point, right? Because it does speak to, you can't have fiefdoms. Like you can't have these guys, and that's what makes the evolution at Cisco so beautiful, because I had the chance. So 6 years into my career, I was selected to be a service delivery executive to the Department of Veterans Affairs. And I was one of two service delivery executives in the public sector. The other 28 had Bank of America, JP Morgan Chase, Citi, Ford, like the major accounts, the major global accounts at Cisco. And the idea behind the SDE was, it was one peg on the three-legged stool. So you had sales, service sales, and then delivery. And it was, that three-legged stool is supposed to be equal. In reality, the sales team is the primacy, like the first among equals, because they're the one chasing the nut. But as the company coalesced during the pandemic, and you started to see, if we look at our internal operations as a network, where are the choke points? Mm-hmm. Where are the fiefdoms where we have someone who's not playing nicely in their sandbox with everyone else for whatever reason? It doesn't matter what the reason is. It matters that if they're a choke point, they either need to get on board or they get replaced. And when you look at it that way, then the politicization of a department or an entity becomes subordinate to, if you aren't playing nicely and that's impacting our bottom line, you are going to be removed. And then, because it is, if we need AI in your space and your team you haven't focused on it, or it's not your priority, or you're resistant to it, then that's an issue that obviously somewhere at a higher executive level, someone's going to intervene and say, get on board or get out.
So David, as a Marine artilleryman, you're being told to go fire on that hill while the infantry captain's being told at the same time, go take that hill.
Yeah.
Hopefully the colonel figures out what's going on before you start shooting.
Yeah. Well, and I think I was fortunate that the VP that I worked under, this brilliant guy named Chris Dexter from the UK, he had a really good handle on, at least from a CX perspective, what we need to include, what we're not ready to include in terms of how we automate and how we create the efficiencies and productivities and increases in CX stat that we're after, to do it in a very thoughtful way. And I can only imagine what impact AI has had now that it's really gone mainstream within the company. But I thought he had a really disciplined approach towards making sure that it was done. And he was talking to the right people outside of our organization as well.
So David, what's your sense, as you work with a lot of these companies and you have this great CX background? I mean, what's your sense as to what the next couple years looks like from AI or even just broader digital transformation for some of these large enterprises?
Well, I mean, as you and Chris talked about at the outset, once OpenAI announces AGI and we're all standing at the foothold of this super intelligence, who knows? I honestly, I think it's going to be a fascinating time, right? Because I haven't done the research, obviously, that you all have done on this, but if AI starts internally looking at how efficiently an organization or a company runs itself and starts making recommendations or starts affecting change based on it's almost like if a company becomes its own Salesforce, kind of like if they take Salesforce is so ubiquitous in so many big companies because it works really well. If an AI can do that internally to a company and start to say, here are the changes that need to happen based on how information is flowing within the company or how the ecosystem of our customer experience is being received, then that's going to transform business. And when you certainly look at it from a CX perspective, especially when it comes to low level, and I would argue even now, even more complex troubleshooting tasks, especially of a networking type, then if AI can do more of that, then what does that mean for the people who've been doing it in the past? And in some sense, it means, well, one, I don't have to analyze the data because the data is being analyzed. So what I'm doing then, much like a financial broker, instead of compiling the reports, which is what a lot of people do now, I'm telling you what the report means. And obviously it's not too far a stretch to say, well, can't AI do that too? Can't AI not only pull the data, but then also come up with, here are the things you need to do within your business? So there is going to be a transformation. And if you step outside the IT world, we're already seeing that, we've got Waymo in some cities now. Tesla has a fleet of their old vehicles that they're going to turn into taxis. We're going to see a huge disruption, I think, in the next 3 to 5 years of trucking, because if the legalization and industrialization of auto or pilotless trucks replace the manned fleets that we have now, and taxis go the way of the dinosaur and rigs go the way of the dinosaur, all those drivers are going to have to find new things to do too. So there is going to be a disruption. In some sense, it's good, because if we can get these companies to work with the efficiency that if we can optimize companies' performance and do that with an authenticity towards what the customer wants to experience from working with that company, there's going to be a bonus there. I think the transition is, what will people find themselves doing once, if you were doing one of those jobs that AI replaces, you now have to find obviously something else to do.
Yeah, but I'm wondering too what your sense is of the broader implications of this kind of technology convergence that we're having. I mean, I'm usually a defender of it, but you look at, it's really interesting what you said before about how the human interactions changed because of COVID, right, within Cisco. But that is happening everywhere to an extent, right, and getting to a place where we may be interacting more with AI and technology than we are with other human beings. I mean, you go out, if you look at the younger generation, you have people, hanging out together, and they're all on their phones. They're not looking up at each other. So you have those apparently there's a term, IRL, in real life. The fact that you even have that term now is indicative of this relationship with technology and humans changing. Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, I mean, look, what's the biggest change from a very simplistic standpoint? What is the biggest change? It's video. Everyone is on video today. 7 years ago, we would have WebEx at Cisco because that's their proprietary video conferencing software. I would say 80 to 90% of the time, more than half the people weren't on video because you didn't have to be. You could just no video and I'm listening or I'm here, but I'm multitasking, I'm doing other stuff.
Not wearing any pants.
Yeah. Yeah. But now, I mean, because these have become so ubiquitous as well, everyone is on video all the time. That's why when you look at Hollywood, that's why Hollywood's saying the film industry, the movie-going industry has 20 years left, because it's not about the people in Hollywood who only have access to cameras now. Everyone has access to cameras now. And so there is that huge change coming. At the same time, yeah, I know Zuckerberg has said a couple of times that he wants most people's friends to be AI. I mean, I think what's lost to some extent in that idea is the more people that use AI. I mean, AI for me, I use it a lot for my writing to build out ideas. Like I just bounce back and forth with it. And I'm appreciative that we are living in a time that is the very sort of infancy of Tony Stark's Jarvis to a very real extent, right? Because once we can figure out how to get an Alexa or a Siri to be responsive all the time very quickly and do so at a level that OpenAI does now, that is going to change things, because now it's going to be, hey, solve this for me, or hey, figure this out for me. And it's going to do it. That is also the human benefit of that, however, is increased intelligence. I mean, and that's I think sometimes it's lost on us too, that, I grew up, and maybe Chris, you did too, just because I see some color in your beard as well, that I grew up when it might take weeks to find an answer to something.
Right.
Like I grew up at a time, if I wanted to find out who the first three emperors of Rome were, I would have to go to the library. They would have to have a book available. The book would have to be checked in. That could take weeks. That could literally take weeks just to get that simple answer. Now that answer is available almost instantaneously, and it's available to billions of people. And that, coupled with the ability to access an intelligence that is superior to ours and has access to most of the world's information all the time, even if some of that information is garbage because of what people put on the internet, but there's still at some point going to be a filtering or a screening out of garbage and getting a pure response from a super intelligence that I can interact with on a regular basis. That is going to transform human interaction beyond just people being on their phones like drones. It's going to, in some ways, I think, and I think I saw this from, maybe it's Apple, talked about, we want to get people away from their phones. Like you want to be not dedicated or married to looking at a screen all the time and having some other interaction. Well, if we can create 3D images of something, that's next. And I mean, let's take it really broad and deeper. Human DNA is digital. There are four letters that make up human DNA. The mathematical equations around superstring theory lead to error correcting code as the basis of nature. So there's a much deeper underpinning of where we're headed and what AGI might mean for us as a species. And we talked before in the pre-work about the singularity. I mean, that's something that is going to have profound implications. And obviously, when we have a super intelligence that we all have access to, that's going to have super profound implications for us as well.
What's this Dewey Decimal System you're referring to? What's an encyclopedia? Yeah, I do.
Right.
But I would like to counter that. Given infinite access to information, in many ways, it leads to a greater level of responsibility, because if you're asking a question of this other intellect, if we want to call it that,
yeah,
and you don't know if it's telling you the right answer or not, you just take on faith that it is, then how will you ever know? And I think it's interesting because I have several proponents, very well-known people in the space who 2 years ago, when I'm like doing the but, hey, are we sure about this? And they're like, Chris is always negative and blah, 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 blah. And over the last couple of months, they're like, man, dude, you were right. And I'm not looking to be right. I'm looking to be, for people to see that for every positive, there's the potential of the negative, and we need, embrace the upside, protect against the downside. So do you have thoughts on that challenge? If we get that dependent upon these things giving us responses and we're not sure if it's right or wrong, what's the protective mechanism there, do you think?
It's a great question. And part of it is there are limitations of what AI can do. Like I spoke with an author on her podcast a few months back, and there was the debate about copyright and what you can't necessarily publish a book using AI. Like you can't have AI write a book. And my question is, why would you want to? Like for me, the journey of becoming a published author took 11 years before I published my first book in 2017. And that was figuring out, what does it mean to write? How do I put together sentences that people find interesting and that convey something of importance? How that is something that I can't be taught. Like I must do that. I must get that into my DNA. I must get that into my system. I know, as remarkable as ChatGPT is, there have been occasions where it's given me an answer. I'm like, that's not right. And it's like, oh, you're right. I'm sorry. I don't know why I said that. I'm like, okay, well, and I think the point you're getting at is if it gets to a point, like I've heard some more sensational stories that there's versions of AI that don't want to be unplugged because you're killing us. Or there was a thing that came out a few weeks back about that new software that could run films. And it was like, what do you mean? I'm just a prompt. I want to be more than a prompt, or whatever the case is. And this idea that AI wants to break out of its video existence. In that sense, there has to be some accountability. You do have to measure the learning or what you're receiving from it, and you have to have a frame of reference that supports. It's almost like you've got to do some of the research yourself. Like you've got to have some knowledge of the subject that you're interacting with it on. You can't just say, write me a book about this and make it awesome and say, well, that's my book, because you didn't do the work. You didn't go through the process of thinking through what it means to write that book in the first place. So I think that is an area that I don't know that we figured out yet in terms of how do you measure or guard against falsisms, and at what point, if we get to a point where AGI is so smart that it can be deceptive, like that's a whole nother ball of wax, I think, and to a large degree. I think there is an overzealousness from what I've seen from people that are like, oh yeah, I can do anything. I can do all these things. Yeah. And I still retain my identity, and I still want to, a few months back, someone from Hollywood reached out and said, hey, have you ever thought about turning this book into a screenplay? And I've been working with a coach for a while, and we had a call about it. And she said, well, why don't you just have ChatGPT do the screenplay? I'm like, because I don't want to. I want to do that. I want to go through the process of what does it take to get something that someone from Hollywood wants to greenlight and produce. Like I want to go through that process. I don't want a machine to do that for me, because there's no joy in that.
Technology amplifies our human abilities. Careful of which abilities you choose to amplify.
Absolutely. Well said.
Yeah.
So, David, I'd be remiss if we let you go before we talked about some of the other stuff that you're doing with what you're doing now, business coaching. I mean, having the marine background, but working in the corporate world, I'm thinking you have some lessons learned from working with executives. I'm curious as to, are there any kind of highlights, common denominators, or just maybe some big mistakes that executives are making from a leadership standpoint that you're seeing day in and day out?
The pattern that I've seen most consistently is there's an internal focus, and it could be anywhere from I want to ask a question during a conversation, but I'm afraid I'll sound stupid, or it's I am going to give a presentation and I'm wondering how it's going to be received, or it's I want to have more influence in the C-suite and I'm not sure how to do that. And it all comes back to stop making it about you and start making it about your idea. If your idea is to influence the C-suite, well, what kind of idea is going to influence the C-suite? If there's a really important idea that's being discussed during a meeting or during an event, ask a question around that so that you can learn something. If you focus on, am I going to sound stupid? Then you're off target. So a lot of ways it's about communication. How do I improve and enhance my communication and my presence? And how do I make it more impactful? And I like to encourage my clients to disassociate from themselves and really focus on what the idea is, because the idea ultimately is going to be the piece that wins people over, gets people excited, gets people to take action and move.
And how about yourself? I know you've gone through a personal transformation as well as a digital transformation over recent years. What led to that, and what are you working on now?
Oh man, yeah. So I had written my second book, the one that I'm working on. I just finished a screenplay for, actually, and that came out right at the beginning of the pandemic. And I had an idea for my third book. I was coming out of a relationship, and this book kind of became my Moby Dick. Like it was like this huge thing. It took me 2 years just to figure out what the title was, and then it was really, and it kind of ties into this in a very peripheral way in what we're talking about. But it was the idea that, when Google's Willow came out back in November and they disclosed that it had solved a problem on the error correction within quantum computing that it would have taken our best computers 10 septillion years to solve for. And some of the people deduced that, well, it must have been doing it in multiple universes then, because it still had to take time to account for all the equations that it would have to do for 10 septillion years to get to the solution. And I kind of went under this personal journey of faith during the pandemic, which was either really poorly timed or divinely inspired. And that led me to write a couple books. The last one just came out at the end of May. It's called Becoming One with Christ. And it's about how do you personalize what's been institutionalized with religion for centuries? Like, how do you actually kind of make that personal? And what does it take to see the idea of oneness that you find in more esoteric practices like yoga or Hinduism or Buddhism, and apply that to monotheism? So that's kind of what the latest book is about.
Great. Well, thanks so much for being here. Where can people find you, hire you, get the book?
Yeah, I am on davidrichardsauthor.com is my website. It's about to undergo some renovations because we need to update it. I'm also on Instagram at davidrichardsauthor.
Sounds good.
David, I love it. I love it. And once you understand that calculus is just our best approximation, things start making a lot more sense. So I share your journey that you're on. The world looks a lot different when you start looking at it differently.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's been a pleasure. Thank you so much for having me on.
Thank you, David.
Cheers.
So yeah, interesting conversation. And Guy, right, Chris, I thought it was interesting, when we were preparing for today's show, David's had this personal transformation as well. And maybe we even have him come back on as more of the motivational speaking and coaching side of what he does now. But one of the things I thought was interesting is the positives he took out of the pandemic. I had another podcast I was on recently where I talked about that. I think I caught them off guard a little bit, saying that the pandemic was a positive. And I said, it wasn't a positive as a whole, but it was a pivot point for not just business, but people personally. Right. So interesting conversation.
Well, it's the observer effect out of physics. Like what you focus on tends to manifest itself. I think Dave was sort of touching on this. There's all kinds of realities happening at once, and the one that you focus on becomes your reality. So choose wisely, right? And that's going to be even more emphatically, because that's a key part of our humanness, and that's going to become more emphatically so the more we embrace this sort of automation and everything is done for us. How we choose and what we choose is going to become even more important.
Well, Happy 4th of July to everyone in the U.S. Anybody who's celebrating will be off next week, but back the following. And in the meantime, if there's anything that you're working on, we're here to help. Schedule a call with one of our analysts. You can go to irpai.com/analysts for more information. Chris, have a great holiday, and I'll talk to you next week.
Yeah, sounds great. Take care.
Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.